Dad perfect events. My daughter showed up at my new house with 12 suitcases, claiming she wanted to take care of me after 15 years of silence. What she didn't know was that I had 18 million reasons to be suspicious, and I was about to teach her the most expensive lesson of her life. My name is Theodore Ted Pierce, and I'm 58 years old. I was standing on the deck of my new Lake Forest home that Tuesday afternoon, watching the sun reflect off the lake while sipping coffee from my favorite mug. The peace I'd found in this place was something I'd worked 40 years to earn. Then the doorbell rang. I set down my coffee and walked through the living room, my boots echoing on the hardwood floors. The house was too big for one man, but after selling Pierce Landscaping for $18 million, I figured I'd earned the right to spread out a little. Plus, Martha always wanted a house on the lake. Even though she'd been gone 5 years now, I kept her dream alive. I pulled open the heavy oak doors and felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. Standing there was my daughter Kate, looking exactly like her mother, but with none of Martha's warmth in her eyes. Next to her stood some guy I didn't recognize, thin, nervous, sweating, despite the cool October air. Behind them was a teenage girl I barely knew, but recognized as my granddaughter. "Hey, Dad," Kate said, not even waiting for me to respond before pushing past me into the house. Her heels clicked against my marble foyer like bullets hitting stone. Wow, you really went all out with this place. Must have cost a fortune. I stood there holding the door, watching this woman who'd cut me out of her life after Martha's funeral waltz into my home like she owned the deed. The man, her husband I assumed, started dragging in suitcase after suitcase. I counted them as they came through my doorway. 12 suitcases for what was supposed to be a visit. "Kate," I said, finding my voice. "What are you doing here?" She spun around, hands on her hips, surveying my living room like she was calculating the value of every piece of furniture. "Well, that's a fine greeting for your only daughter. We heard about your new house through some mutual friends, and Ben and I thought it was time to reconnect. Families should stick together, especially now that you're getting older. The nerve of this woman. She didn't even show up to Martha's funeral, claiming she was too busy with work to make the trip. Now she wanted to talk about families sticking together? This is my husband, Ben Rodriguez," she said, gesturing to the guy still hauling luggage. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. "And you remember Becky, right? Your granddaughter? She's 17 now." I looked at the girl, Becky. She was pale as fresh snow, practically swimming in an oversized denim jacket, even though it was 65 degrees outside. Her eyes darted around nervously, and when they met mine, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Fear, pure, unadulterated fear. "What's wrong with her?" I asked, nodding toward Becky. "Just tired from the trip," Kate said quickly, stepping between me and the girl. "We drove straight through from Chicago. Look, Dad, we need to talk. Life's been challenging lately. The economy, you know. When we heard about your success with the business sale, we figured maybe it was time to be a family again." She walked over to my leather sofa and ran her hand along the back, testing the quality. "You're getting older, living alone in this massive house. It's not safe for a man your age. What if you fell? What if you had a medical emergency? Who would know?" I watched her performance, recognizing the manipulation tactics she'd learned from her mother's playbook. But where Martha used those skills to help people, Kate was using them for something else entirely. "We thought we'd move in," Ben spoke up for the first time, his voice shaky and uncertain. "Help take care of you. This place is huge, plenty of room for all of us. It would be like old times." Old times? The man had never been to my house before in his life. I'd never even met him until today. I stared at them, processing the sheer audacity. They show up after 15 years of silence, with enough luggage to outfit a small army, and they think they can just move into my house? "You can stay tonight," I said finally, my voice measured and careful. "Becky looks sick, and I'm not going to turn away family in need. But we're going to have a serious conversation in the morning about what you're really doing here." Kate's smile was sharp as a contractor's knife. "Of course, Dad. We have so much catching up to do. You must be so lonely in this big place. It'll be good to have voices in the house again." I showed them to the guest wing, a self-contained area with 3 bedrooms and its own sitting room. As I watched them settle in, something my old foreman Joe used to say kept echoing in my head. When someone shows up unannounced with that many bags, they're either running from something or running towards something. Either way, you better find out which. That night, I lay in my bed listening to sounds from the guest wing, voices hushed and urgent, carried through the walls despite the house's solid construction. I couldn't make out words, but the tone was crystal clear. They were planning something, and it had nothing to do with taking care of their old man. I got up and walked to my window, looking out at the lake Martha loves so much. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd start finding out exactly what my daughter was really after. Because in 40 years of running a business, I'd learned to spot a con job from a mile away. The next morning, I found Kate in my kitchen at 7 a.m., ordering around my housekeeper Dorothy like she was running a 5-star hotel. Dorothy Taylor had been with me since I bought the place. A good woman who took pride in her work and knew exactly how I liked my coffee. But right now, she looked close to tears. No, that's all wrong, Kate snapped, pointing at the breakfast spread Dorothy had prepared. We need fresh fruit, not canned. And this coffee tastes like dishwater. Don't you have anything better? This is a $4 million house, not a truck stop. Mrs. Taylor, I said gently, walking into my own kitchen like I was entering a war zone. Why don't you take the morning off? Go visit your sister in town. I'll handle things here. Dorothy shot me a grateful look and practically fled. She'd worked for wealthy families before, but she'd never been treated like hired help in my house. That was about to change back. After Dorothy left, Kate turned to me with that fake smile I was starting to recognize. She'd poured herself coffee in my best china cup and was sitting at my kitchen island like she owned the place. Dad, we need to talk about your situation, she said, stirring cream into her coffee with deliberate precision. Ben's been looking at your finances. Well, what we could figure out from public records, and honestly, we're worried. Ben appeared from the pantry, holding a box of expensive cereal that I knew for a fact I'd never bought. He nodded eagerly, like a dog hoping for a treat. The property taxes on a house like this must be enormous. And at your age, managing all these assets, it's got to be stressful. Stress isn't good for someone in their late 50s. I poured myself coffee from the pot Dorothy had made before the interrogation began. My finances are fine. Are they, though? Kate pressed, leaning forward. Because Becky mentioned you seemed confused yesterday, forgetting where you put things, getting lost in your own house. Maybe it's time to let family help you. We could take over the financial management, make sure everything's handled properly. There it was. The real reason they'd driven through the night with 12 suitcases. They thought I was some senile old fool sitting on a pile of money, ripe for the picking. I took a slow sip of coffee, watching them over the rim of my mug. In 40 years of running Pierce Landscaping, I'd dealt with plenty of con artists, contractors who promised the moon and delivered a pothole, clients who tried to skip out on payment after the work was done. But I'd never expected to be getting the treatment from my own daughter. I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I'm managing just fine. Built a company from nothing, sold it for more money than most people see in a lifetime. I think I can handle paying some property taxes. Kate's mask slipped for just a second, and I saw something ugly underneath. Dad, be reasonable. You're 58 years old, living alone, obviously struggling with some memory issues. We're family. We want to help you. That afternoon, while Kate and Ben were out exploring the neighborhood, probably casing the joint for valuable items, Becky approached me in my study. I was going through some paperwork, trying to figure out exactly what they were after, when I heard a soft knock on the door. Grandpa? Her voice was barely a whisper. Can we talk? Privately? I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention. She looked even worse in daylight. Dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept in weeks, hands shaking slightly when she thought I wasn't looking. What's wrong, sweetheart? That's when the floodgates opened. She told me everything, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Kate and Ben had lost everything in cryptocurrency trading. Not just some money, everything. The house, the cars, Ben's 401k, even Becky's college fund. They'd borrowed against credit cards to keep trading, thinking they could win it all back. Instead, they dug themselves into a hole so deep they couldn't see daylight. But the worst part was what came next. They owe money to a man named Rich Coleman, Becky said, tears streaming down her face. He's not a bank, Grandpa. He's scary. They borrowed $500,000 from him when the banks wouldn't lend them anymore. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Rich Coleman. I knew that name from the construction business. He was the kind of man who loaned money to desperate people at rates that would make a credit card company blush. The payments were supposed to be $15,000 a month, Becky continued. But they couldn't make them, so now he wants the full $500,000, plus penalties. And if they can't pay? She broke down completely then, sobbing into her hands. I moved around my desk and put my arm around her shoulders, feeling how thin she'd gotten. This girl was skin and bones. He has a son, she managed to get out between sobs. Charlie. He's 25 and he's been in prison twice. Mr. Coleman said. He said if they can't pay the money, they could settle the debt another way. By letting me marry Charlie. The rage that filled me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. Not the quick anger that flares up and dies down, but the cold, calculating fury that settles in your bones and stays there. They agreed to this? I asked, keeping my voice calm, even though I wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Mom said it would be a good match and that I should be grateful to help the family. She said Charlie's family has money and that I'd be better off with them anyway since they can't afford to send me to college. I stared at this brave girl, barely 17 years old, telling me her own parents were planning to sell her like cattle to pay off their gambling debts. Becky, I said, looking her straight in the eye, that's never gonna happen. I promise you that. She looked up at me with hope for the first time since she'd walked through my door. But the debt, they say you have money now from selling the business. They want to ask you for help with part of it. But the marriage thing, they said that's still going to happen, regardless. That's when I knew exactly what I was dealing with. They hadn't come here to reconnect with family. They'd come here to rob me blind and sell their daughter to a criminal. And they thought I was too old and too stupid to stop them. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Over the next few days, I played the part they expected me to play. I let my shoulders stoop a little when I walked around them. I pretended to forget where I'd put my reading glasses, even though they were hanging around my neck. I asked the same questions twice and stared blankly when Kate explained simple things to me, like I was a child, and Kate ate it up. Every stumble, every confused look, every moment of apparent weakness made her eyes light up like Christmas morning. She started speaking louder and slower, like I was hard of hearing. She began making decisions about my house without asking, rearranging furniture, throwing away things she deemed clutter, telling Dorothy what needed to be cleaned and when. But while I was playing the confused old man during the day, I was busy at night. Real busy. First, I called my lawyer, not the family attorney who'd handled simple stuff over the years, but Victoria Collins, a sharp woman who had helped me navigate the business sale and knew exactly what kind of sharks swam in rich waters. Victoria, it's Ted Pierce. I need you to do some research for me, and I need it done quietly. I told her about Kate and Ben, about the debt and the threats. Victoria listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes I could hear through the phone. Rich Coleman, she said when I finished. I know that name. He operates out of Chicago. Technically runs a private lending business, but everyone knows what he really is. The good news is that if he's holding paper on a debt that size, it's probably legal enough that we can work with it. What do you mean? I mean, if the debt exists and it's properly documented, then it can be bought and sold like any other financial instrument. Give me 48 hours, Ted. I'll find out exactly what your daughter owes and to whom. While Victoria worked her legal magic, I handled the technical side. I called my old friend Danny Kowalski, who'd done security installations for some of my bigger landscaping contracts over the years. Danny, I need cameras installed in my house. Small ones, hidden ones, the kind that record everything, and nobody knows they're there. Danny had worked with me long enough not to ask too many questions. You having trouble with thieves, Ted? Something like that? Can you do it without anyone knowing? I'll come by tomorrow morning when your guests are out. 2 hours max. You'll have coverage of every room except the bathrooms and bedrooms. Audio and video all recorded to a secure server. True to his word, Danny showed up the next morning at 9 a.m. sharp, right after Kate and Ben had left to run errands, which I suspected meant selling off whatever valuables they could find buyers for. Within 2 hours, my house was wired better than a FBI surveillance operation. That night, I got my first real evidence. I was in my study, supposedly reading but actually monitoring the camera feeds on my laptop, when Kate and Ben settled into the guest room sitting area for what they thought was a private conversation. He's getting worse, Kate said, her voice carrying clearly through the hidden microphone Danny had installed in the light fixture. Did you see him today? He couldn't even remember where he kept his checkbook. Are you sure he's not faking? Ben asked. He was pacing back and forth, nervous energy radiating off him. Some of these old guys are smarter than they look. Kate laughed, a cold sound that reminded me nothing of her mother. Trust me, I know my father. He's always been more muscle than brains anyway. 40 years of swinging a shovel doesn't exactly develop critical thinking skills. The insult stung, but I kept watching. This was just the beginning. So, what's the timeline? Ben continued. Coleman's breathing down our necks. He wants an answer by the end of the month. I've already called that lawyer friend of mine, Will Thompson. He can have the paperwork ready by Friday. Power of attorney, guardianship documents, the works. Once we get Dad declared incompetent, we can liquidate whatever assets we need to make the payment. And if he resists? Kate reached into her purse and pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. Even through the camera, I could see her shaking pills into her palm. These are leftover from when Mom was sick, she said. Powerful stuff. If I crush them up and put them in his coffee, he'll be too groggy to know what he's signing. Legally, it's not great, but by the time anyone figures it out, we'll have the money and Charlie will have his wife. The casual way she talked about drugging me, about selling her own daughter, made my hands shake with anger, but I forced myself to keep watching, to keep recording. In court, this video would be worth more than any testimony. What about Becky? Ben asked. She's been acting weird since we got here. What if she tries to warn him? Becky knows better. Then to cross me, Kate said, her voice turning hard. I've made it very clear what happens to ungrateful daughters who don't appreciate the sacrifices their parents make. Besides, where's she going to go? She's 17, no money, no car. She needs us. I watch my daughter, my own flesh and blood, plan to drug me, steal my life's work, and sell her child to a criminal. And she was doing it all with the same calculating coldness I'd once admired when she was solving math problems at the kitchen table. The next morning, Victoria called with her research results. Ted, I've got everything you need. Rich Coleman is holding legitimate debt paper, $500,000 principal, plus $47,000 in penalties and interest. The terms are harsh, but legal. And here's the interesting part. He's looking to sell. Sell? Apparently your daughter and son-in-law have become more trouble than they're worth. Coleman's been trying to collect for 8 months now, and he's getting tired of the game. His contacts tell. Me, he'd take $450,000 cash for the full amount owed, just to get them off his books. I sat in my study, looking out at the lake Martha loved, and made the decision that would change everything. Buy it, I told Victoria. Buy the whole debt. I want to be the one holding their leash. Ted, are you sure about this? That's a lot of money. I thought about Becky, scared and thin, being sold like cattle. I thought about Kate planning to drug me. I thought about 40 years of building something meaningful, only to have my own child try to steal it from me. I'm sure. Do it today. By Friday, everything was in place. Victoria had completed the debt purchase. I now owned every penny Kate and Ben owed to Rich Coleman. The cameras were recording everything, and I had enough evidence to put Kate away for elder abuse, conspiracy, and child endangerment. But I wasn't done yet. I wanted them to face their crimes in front of an audience. Kate, I said over breakfast, letting my voice waver slightly. I've been thinking about what you said, about families sticking together. Maybe it would be nice to have a dinner party. Invite some neighbors over to meet you. Kate's eyes lit up like she'd won the lottery. Oh, Dad, that's a wonderful idea. I'd love to meet your neighbors. Some of the people around here are very influential. She was already planning how to impress the Lake Forest social crowd, probably hoping to make connections for her next con job. Great, I said. How about tomorrow night? I'll call my friend Joe Martinez. He was my foreman for 20 years, and maybe a few others from the old crew. Oh, Kate's enthusiasm dimmed slightly. Well, that's nice. But maybe we could also invite some of your neighbors, the ones in those beautiful houses down the lake? Sure, I agreed. We'll make it a real celebration. What Kate didn't know was that I'd already made very specific phone calls. Joe and 5 of the best guys from my landscaping crew were coming, men who'd worked with me for decades and knew exactly what kind of person I was. I'd also invited 3 of my Lake Forest neighbors, including retired Judge Patricia Morrison, who lived 2 houses down. And Victoria Collins would be there too, with some very interesting paperwork. The night of the dinner, Kate was in her element. She'd spent the entire day and about $3,000 of my money that she'd somehow accessed on catering, flowers, and a designer dress that probably cost more than Joe made in a week. She played hostess like she was born to it, charming my neighbors with stories about her successful real estate career and how wonderful it was to be reunited with her father. She introduced Ben as a cryptocurrency consultant and talked about their investment portfolio like they weren't facing bankruptcy. My landscaping crew looked completely out of place in their clean work shirts and khakis, but they were exactly where I needed them to be. These were men who'd known me for decades, who'd watched me build something from nothing, who understood the value of honest work. After dinner, I stood up and tapped my wine glass for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming tonight. My daughter Kate has been staying with me for the past week, and she's been very educational about what it means to take care of family. Kate beamed, thinking this was her moment of triumph. In fact, I continued, pulling out a remote control, she's taught me so much that I thought you should all see exactly how dedicated she is to family values. I hit play. The large TV screen in my dining room came to life, showing crystal clear security footage from 3 nights earlier. Kate's voice filled the room, loud and clear. These are leftover from when Mom was sick. Powerful stuff. If I crush them up and put them in his coffee, he'll be too groggy to know what he's signing. The room went dead silent. I could see Kate's face drain of all color as she realized what was happening. But I wasn't finished. The next clip showed Kate and Ben discussing their plan to sell Becky to Charlie Coleman. Then came the footage of Kate slapping Becky in my kitchen, calling her ungrateful and threatening to teach her some respect. By the time the video ended, Judge Morrison was taking notes. My crew looked ready to throw Kate and Ben off the deck. The neighbors stared at Kate like she was something they'd scraped off their shoes. Now, I said, my voice steady and calm, let me tell you the rest of the story. Kate and Ben owe $500,000 to a loan shark. They've agreed to let him marry off my 17-year-old granddaughter to settle part of the debt. They came here not to take care of me, but to steal enough money to save themselves while still sacrificing their daughter. Kate tried to speak, but Victoria Collins stood up before she could get a word out. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria announced, I'm Mr. Pierce's attorney. What you've just witnessed is documented evidence of conspiracy to commit elder abuse, assault on a minor, and conspiracy to commit fraud. But there's more. She pulled out a legal document and held it up for everyone to see. As of yesterday, Mr. Pierce owns the debt that Kate and Ben Rodriguez owe, all $547,000 of it. The numbers hit Kate like a physical blow. She staggered backward, gripping the edge of the table. You have a choice, I said, looking directly at my daughter. I can have you arrested right now for everything you've planned to do to me and Becky. Or you can sign over custody of your daughter to me, leave my house tonight, and never contact either of us again. Ben didn't hesitate for even a second. Where do I sign? He said, grabbing the custody papers from Victoria. I'm not going to prison. I'm not going to prison for you, Kate. Kate stared at her husband in shock, then at the room full of people who'd witnessed her complete humiliation. Finally, she looked at me with pure hatred. You planned this, she whispered. You taught me everything I needed to know, I replied. You showed me exactly who you really are. She signed the papers with shaking hands. 20 minutes later, the police escorted them both off my property. 6 months later, Becky and I are running a small landscaping design business together. She's smart, hardworking, and everything her parents aren't. Kate got 18 months for elder abuse and assault. Ben got probation and a job washing dishes in Tampa. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about what happened to my daughter. The truth is, I didn't destroy Kate's life. She destroyed it herself the moment she decided to use her own child as payment for her debts. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when things get tough, who protects the innocent, and who stands by their principles even when it costs them everything. Becky and I have that kind of family now, the real kind, and that's worth more than any amount of money. Sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to stop toxic people from destroying innocent lives, even when those toxic people share your blood. Real family isn't determined by genetics. It's built by people who choose to protect each other when the stakes are highest and the cost is personal.